started recording late. I'm just going to quickly sum up. I said that the goal of this catch up should be to figure out what our main obstacles to uh, add more modularity to our code. And then Angela was saying that he's happy to commit, disagree, and commit, but he was mentioning, he started talking about of his previous experience with packages. Please, and I'll take it from here. Sorry, for everyone who's listening. I'll try to be more transparent next time.
Oh, no worries. So yeah, I was just saying that basically, uh, I've had bad experiences with like large package monorepos in the past. I don't think there's like an issue with like having packages. It's just what is the threshold of what's going to be the package, I think is my main question. But I don't know like if that's nitpicking or not or anything. So yeah, feel free to.
I'll hop in real quick because I think that that's a really good point is well what constitutes a package, but I almost think that that's the same thing what constitutes a directory. What is a module?
Course, of
What's the
course.
public API? So it's almost like that's like such a broad like it's well and it's almost like that is the whole the concept or the difficulty of naming things in general comes down to like how do I group these things to a
Yeah.
common thing. So I do think that it's a such an overarching question that I almost don't know if it's going to be solved in this discussion. Would be
Oh
my
yeah, for
would be
sure.
my thought. Um,
I'm just thinking like some concrete examples, like one or two, like think of things that we
yeah,
would theoretically migrate and like what are the gotchas with that? I feel like that would be like
yeah.
the only realistic approach.
And I think you brought up some really good ones. I mean, I was saying, file systems one, but you'd brought up fetch, and we have because one of the things was we have different implementations based upon our platform target, we're browser versus node, and um, um, and I personally like having a package that would be called something like, hey, this is fetch, and I want fetch from my workspace, when I want to import that. And I get an interface that's maybe this is injectable, and I can go from there. The only difficulty that I see is if we do some sort of import on something that just does not exist in that environment for some reason. Um, um, which is usually not the case. Usually you can go, I'm importing code but I didn't use it. Or I've that we've done enough the tree shaking to like, hey, that's now dead code. It never got bundled.
Yeah.
Um, but because you can absolutely have, here's fetch. We have our nice DI registration happening inside of the library, and then you also have your browser and node implementations right there. That's definitely a possibility, and just that's a export everything as and then just have our DI at the root of the application say, oh, I'm a browser, so I'm going to use the browser implementation of fetch. Uh,
Actually, yeah, I do think that would be really nice. Like if we could organize packages in a way where and like orchestrate packages in DI where you just create three different folders or something and it
mhm.
just takes the one that's corresponding to the OS version. That would be pretty nice. Because then you
So
don't
you
have to
could
go.
totally do that. I mean,
Yeah.
I really like the pattern. So in the past, I wrote a lot of C sharp, and C sharp has the idea or the concept of like extension methods. So a lot of times, one of the patterns that people have for DI and C sharp is you would essentially take your service container, make an extension method for it, and call it something like, let's just call it add fetch services or something like that. And but essentially, it's just a function that says add fetch services, takes in DI and maybe some additional options, and then goes, great, I've added everything you need based on those options to your DI container. It'd be really cool if some of and we do that for some packages because I think, and I can't remember which ones off the top of my head, Thomas, you might know, we do something where there's some package has a function, which is you give me a container and I'll fill it with what I need. Um,
I don't quite remember anything like that. I know that we have the connection service that like gets all the services and does something with them. It's getting pretty big,
Uh,
but I don't know exactly about the one that would get a container. I just want to steer the discussion. We have about 30 minutes left, maybe 25.
mhm.
Um, and like if we will try to solve two low-level details or like discuss them, we'll get hung up on them. So I think that here I feel maybe at the like there is a problem. So like a problem is multi-platform packages. And I don't think it's a solved problem. I would be okay for now to have the implementation to like the specific implementations are in the desktop package. They are just against an interface that's
Mhm.
not packaged in the desktop folder. They are just against some package interface if it really has to be desktop or browser specific. But and we just inject them and they are going to be there at runtime. For now, ideally later we would go with something what Angelo was suggesting, that we would have some like a given pattern for how one package can, that would be my preference, even though it a little bit messes up the dependency when you would want to see dependency chart for only um, browser or desktop. But my preference would have to have all that code collocated somewhere, even if it's for desktop and browser, because otherwise creating three packages for everything sounds like we are going to have package overload. But that's something that I would be happy to create like a follow-up issue that we would discuss,
Mhm.
where we would somehow solve it. And in the meantime, we can just keep everything in the non-package directory that is platform specific
Mhm.
temporarily.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just wanted to, and I don't want to take too much time from you and like keep talking. Just like my golden standard for packages is Go packaging, where you just have a folder, everything that in the folder that has a capital letter is exposed. I wish we could do something
It's so
similar. It's never going to be that nice in TypeScript and JavaScript, but that's like how I like to think about encapsulation of like a code details versus what you are exposing. And that's why I'm so pro modularity. Not like packages are a terrible thing. Like they are, it's like the democracy. It's the worst out of the good. No, what is it? What's the, the quip that I'm looking for? Like democracy is the worst government method. It's only problem that all the other ones are even worse or something like that.
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
the packages in TypeScript or Node are the same. They are just terrible way to modularize code, but I don't know of anything better to keep the separation. Cool. Cool. So the granularity, we said that we could try to compile some examples, but I think it's going to be case by case. Like I think that, for example, logging is very tiny granularity. It's just one interface. Ideally, we would probably introduce more like a larger, but then it's nicer to be able to like cherry pick. I only depend on logging and not on something else that we would bundle in.
Yeah.
Like if we bundle
yeah.
DI and logging together, it's nice to have that. Maybe for these utilities, we can keep it like one file packages, but for features, it would be ideal like a feature file with like 20 feature folder with 20 files in it or 30 files.
That's
Nothing
what
too
that's
Oh,
what
small.
I'm
sure.
that's what I'm thinking is like when I think of package, I think of like a lot of code, not like a
Yeah.
small amount of code.
That would be my ideal case as well.
But
Yeah.
like
But like a, yeah,
what
The
I was
only thing that I would say is I'm not a huge fan of and you were talking about this, you were touching on this about I'm not a huge fan of like having here's a core package that it contains all DI, it contains all log, it contains all let me think of another one. I mean even like includes GitLab API or something because if we threw all those together, you're gonna say, oh well really I only needed the logger. But now um, I've explicitly asked for something that gives me all of this stuff. And so it gets harder for us to kind of like someone who jumps into a package goes, "Oh, I imported core." Well, what did they import from core? What do they actually need? I don't know until I
oh,
actually write the code.
like core imports other packages or
No, 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 no. So if I'm a downstream service and I import core and core is
yeah.
this giant, let's say it's the entire common folder. It's like, well, I have
Yeah,
no
no,
idea what I
yeah,
need
yeah.
from that.
I don't know,
I'm
Tomas, were you saying like core would be a package that would depend on other features that how it would be packages? Is that what you were saying? Or
I know I'm like with the like I was just saying that I would ideally prefer to have more files than one in the packages. Like
Yeah.
in ideal scenario, it would like contain some encapsulated piece of functionality, but not too tiny. Because yes, you get clearer dependency diagrams, but you also get the overhead of thinking about which package it is in and like so. But with the core, my idea, just a side note because that's not directly related, but we already have the GitLab org core package, and I thought
Mhm.
that that would be all the services that are necessary the for the language server to even start. So that would be like a API client, maybe some project definitions and configuration. Something like that would be encapsulated in one package, maybe 50
Yeah.
files with tests or something like that would be my idea. But
Yeah.
since we are like running out of time, the package granularity that we are right that that's going to be a topic of constant discussion. Can we split this? Can we migrate this? But okay, so the multi-platform package problem is that we for now will keep it in the where it is, the desktop and browser folder, and we inject it to some interface that's in a package. Uh, Dependencies management, how to handle. Yeah,
So
there is
this
a.
was this was going to be like my next point. Like if we're thinking about practical examples, so like the one that started this conversation is the AI context manager, right? So
Mhm.
the issue with AI context manager, this is just my opinion, is like if we move AI context manager and we move uh what like I don't disagree with going with packages and AI context managers, or I think it should be AI context is its own package with all the providers in that same package. That's what I would prefer. But in order to do that, it depends on like at least 10 different source common dependencies. So that's what my proposal is saying, like, hey, like rather than just moving it now to solve Lena's problem, like we could do something small to just piecemeal it, but I would prefer to see like let's move the core stuff out first, then lastly move AI context into its own package so that like it's done cleanly and done like in a more official way. That was kind of my um
Yeah. Now, one thing I would definitely say, and I've done this, is if we're not like at that point where it's not the time to move this. I mean, Lena could absolutely just declare, this is the interface that I need. I'm calling this essentially, you know, Duo Chat AI context in some interface. And then I just create a nice shim that says, all right, this is I'm mapping from one. So if the interface changes, like the actual AI context manager interface changes, you could even say, I still rely on the same one that I need, and I'll just apply whatever else I need,
yeah.
to make it work. That's definitely a possibility. And I think that's a really good, you know, um, when you're working with you're working with a third party dependency and you have to go, well, I want to rely on my own internal interface for it, which is in this case, it's almost like DuoChat's a client to, or
Yeah.
not a client to, but it's, this is a dependency and they almost don't need to kind of feel like, there's this tight coupling. They can go, I have the interface I want to work with and
Yeah.
and I can just make that function. So it's almost like for this case, I'm totally cool with saying, hey, the AI context manager doesn't need to move yet, but we should be on the expectation of
Should move it. We
great if
should
we
move
could
it.
move it. Yes,
Yeah.
and reorganize it where you're like, hey, all of AI context belongs in one package. That makes a lot of sense to me because that's how everyone else is going to use it. Everyone else is going to rely on AI context as one thing. Um,
Exactly. And it should be that way. But the what we'd have to do first is like just off the top of my head, we'd have to
yeah.
move repository service. We'd
Hmm.
have to move the document transformer service.
Hmm.
'Cause we're going to be integrating code suggestions for DaVinci Phase 2 into
Hmm.
that. Config service will need to be probably its own package, I'm assuming. I don't
Yep.
know if like all those things got to move first, and then we can move like the downstream dependencies should move first. Then once we have that, then we can it'll be just like moving AI context
Yeah.
out of that.
Yeah.
I think, but what we need though is like a kind of my idea with just putting the interfaces in a package and then having the implementation still in the common folder was that we will stop the bleeding of, if we can all agree that we want to have modular code, but we also agree that like we can't have it all now because we have legacy code that's not modular and we don't have the capacity to go and rewrite everything into packages. The problem with that is that like that this line of reasoning like won't stop if we will have to now move implementation of like implementation of chat into the common folder because we don't have the AI context manager that's dependency yet
Mhm.
available as a package. And that will like have a downstream consequences, which like I would understand that we can't do it because the AI context manager is under heavy development. If it was a separate package in a separate repository and we would be incurring, the refactoring cost of refactoring, rewriting interface and then implementation somewhere else and releasing packages in between, that would be heavy. But if it's all in one folder, maybe we could put some, like at least some kind of facade or some interface that the
Yeah.
chat needs into a separate package so the chat doesn't have to be in common anymore. And that's like we will draw the line there, create follow up, tech debt issues for migrating the dependencies of AI context manager into packages eventually. But like we won't be making it this single folder problem any bigger.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think we
Yeah.
should do that and then just make sure we create, I don't know, like an epic or something, or we can create multiple issues under. And I feel like just like if we touch some part of code, like think about, hey, can this just be moved to a package? And then like, but start with the lowest level dependencies first, like
Mhm.
dependencies with no dependencies, and then just move it like while we're doing our work and just have something to track it. Because I can think of like, for instance, like I'm about to pull out, I think, secret redactor out of the document transformer. Um, if people think that's okay. And like we could move that, like I could just move that to a package while doing that at the same time.
Mhm.
We've
Um,
done something very similar with the DI. Like when we decided that DI is the way we want to go,
yeah,
we
exactly. Yeah.
started pulling apart and we've done a really good job. Like most of the language servers in DI now, and so I would assume it took like 9 months, I think, since we introduced DI, or 8 months since we introduced DI till like the whole language server run on DI. I would not expect that like this decision will take any like sooner. But we also had an idea, in a progress to DI, we already had an idea about, okay, if you want to make your class DI ready, you make sure that it accepts everything in constructor. You make sure
Mhm.
that it uses this and this pattern. And so I think that that would be the same, having like a process for making your new things package ready, even if you have to implement them in common because all the dependencies are in common kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yep. Yep. For sure. And then just move them if we can. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if that would be a lot, but I think it should be okay as long as we like move the small ones first. I think it'll be like if someone tries to move repository, no, maybe not repository service. That might be able to be moved, but like something that depends on something else. I'm trying to think like
Like
suggestion service.
config, for example, as well. Like config it has like, feature specific items. Like you have a config for security scanning, config for code suggestions, and those interfaces are belong to the features, not to the config quite often. So that's one of the things that you kind of
Yeah.
can't pull.
So speaking of config specifically, do we like the idea of packages relying on config? Since that seems like an application specific kind of, hey, that we know the config looks like this, whereas maybe a feature says, I just want a config, it follows this, I have a structure that I want. It almost seems like config should be something where I'm expecting something called my thing, my module's options. And then I would say my module's options is created at the root of the application and just injected through DI.
Yeah.
That way
Um,
you don't need config. Nothing relies on config. Config just lives and then serves as a intermediate layer on the application to then serve the actual options that individual services need.
I've been thinking about it a lot. I am not sure. I think like I like the idea that, same as we are doing it with all the handlers for, um, sorry, like I'll continue the thought. I'm just realizing we have 8 minutes left. Do you have anything critical to, or like a super important to discuss before? Like, so I'm just going to sum up what we discussed. I can go back to the config later, but we said that we agree that modularizing the code is the way. We agreed that um, packages are probably the mechanism that we want to use for it because I don't know of any better. I would kill for some better mechanism. I'm happy if we find it. Otherwise, the packages will be it. And we will stop bleeding with making it doesn't even have to, if it would make it too hard for AI context manager for the interface to live somewhere else, I'll leave it to you, Angelo. Like for example, the refactoring. I don't think it spans packages. So for example, if you refactor the interface in a package, I'm not sure whether it will go and update. For example, you change the method name and it will go and update the method name somewhere else. And you, Angela, were saying that you are still kind of, you expect changes to the AI context manager. So maybe we can stop the bleeding by having a facade. Doesn't necessarily have to be directly that interface that we would take out, but it would be something that all other packages will be programming against. And then,
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting is basically like practically what we would do is create a package, move the AI context manager interface and AI context item interfaces in there, and then chat and source import those, right?
awesome.
What you're saying?
That sounds
Yeah,
perfect.
that's what I was thinking.
Okay. And so that sounds like the key things that we were discussing on those issues are kind of like that's the general direction we want to go in. And I think that for the remaining like the details of how we're going to do that, I don't need this sync meeting. Would that be fair to say?
I think it's as long as we like the action, to me, it seems like the clear action item is like we need to move towards it, but we need to make sure that we move towards it, right? So I don't know whether it's like creating a centralized epic or issue, but something that like everybody's aware of it. And we just like slowly work towards moving towards it over time, right? With like the end goal of like that same package that we created for AI context, it like eventually just has everything in it. I think if that's in there, we'll know that like a ton of the core dependencies have been moved to their own packages. So, um,
Good, yeah.
and I don't know, like, John, do you think there's any package managers? Like, is it controversial to not use NPM? Like, um,
I
is
know
NPM
even at
good at
GitLab, a lot of people are using Yarn. Yarn has better support for like the workspace protocol. So for doing things like so one thing that we do at the root level, and this is because we're using a library that on our build script that will do this that uses the workspace protocol. And by workspace protocol, I mean I'm going to import package A, and in my version I say workspace colon, and then I can say, hey, I can
Yeah.
set a version or whatnot. Um, ideally, everything is just, hey, it's workspace colon star. That way, we don't have to, like, personally, we don't need to name things with the GitLab org prefix, which is bulky and, I'd rather just say, hey, I want fetch. And fetch happens to be imported from workspace star, that would be fantastic. Um, um,
I
but
feel
we
like prefix is having a prefix is nice because like what if you import what if you get
sure.
confused like with I don't know, a real
It's
dependency? I don't know. But
Well, but then at that point, I would rather have it like, hey, it's prefixed at like at ls or something small. GitLab
yeah, yeah,
dash
small,
org
yeah.
is a little bulky for how I would want to go. But anyways, um, the workspace protocol isn't really supported by npm. It's like partially supported, but it's not supported on the dependency level. Like if you want to say my dependency is, you know, um, a at workspace colon star. Instead, you have to go, I want workspace and my version is 0.0.0 and it has to match exactly what the version was. Otherwise, if it other within the
For nested dependencies is what you're saying? Or like,
yes. So if, like I'm in a package and my package depends on another local package,
yeah,
you for npm you have to say this is I want this package. The version has to match exactly what's in the local package. Which is why I always version everything 0.0.0. Because that's like for me a good indicator. This is local. I don't care about the version. Um, but um,
what
uh,
about PNPM? Does PNPM?
PNPM supports the workspace. And personally, I would definitely support PNPM just from a install space perspective.
Yeah,
I love PNPM. NPM is like on the bottom tier for my other my
yeah,
package manager list. But I also know that no, I don't think anyone tried going, hey, does this just work right out the gate with another package manager like our current setup? Um,
no, I mean we could try it pretty easily.
it might be worth it. It definitely support, packages a little cleaner. And then if we had to move back to NPM, what you would probably end up doing is just going, well, we just version 0.0.0 for everything. But the one thing that's more secure about using that workspace protocol is that this has to come from a workspace and it will not try to reach out like to the NPM registry for this item,
Yeah,
which is super helpful in case you're doing something like let's say for instance I've got something called custom fetch or something. Well, probably there's something out there called custom fetch, and you just don't want to. You want to make sure you don't try to grab some dependency you didn't. You have more control over what you're grabbing. So
yeah.
so that was one thing there. Another thing we should definitely have support for is making sure the linting rules for uh, imports are working. Because right now, so with packages, everything gets hoisted up to the top, NPM packages, which means that from anywhere you can go import anything from without needing to put it inside of your dependencies. But we really should enforce that because we want to be able to say this package has an explicit set of dependencies, and these are the packages they depend on. Um,
Yeah.
You mean like you can import anything in our repository with the dot 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 notation where you
So
just
you
dot
can
dot
do
dot
so you
yourself?
can't do that. So ESLint actually does block us from that. But what we should do is if I said I have package GitLab org A, and then I said inside of my source code, so not in my package JSON, in my source code, I said import container from at GitLab org/di. That works today. Um, but it shouldn't.
Shouldn't you be able to do that or no?
No,
Because it's
because
not
you
defined
should
in the
say at the
package.
package
I
JSON, I want to
gotcha.
import, or I need to make sure I have
Oh,
explicit.
okay, okay. I see what you're saying. You have to declare the dependency first, then
Hmm.
import it. Gotcha.
Yes. The way Node works, that's cool because it just kind of keeps going up the package JSON tree to kind of say, hey, I finally found one. But what we want to have happen is go, well, if you weren't explicit, you don't get access to it. Um, and that's an ESLint rule. And for some reason, I hadn't looked into it, but I know it's not working. Um, and maybe it's something really simple fix, but that would be one thing that I think would make it easier for people to see. Oh yeah, I need to make sure that I treat these as packages even though they're all local.
If we are if we are evaluating any new tools, we should come up with the criteria first. Like for me, the most important is that the language server will work like
Hmm.
seamlessly, and I
Hmm.
can refactor, click through, don't have to wait for anything. That works really well now. And
Yep.
then the other criteria is that the ES build somehow understands our packages. Like I'm still, I think I understand our package config, like a setup, maybe like 70%, not more. But yes, build does, so that would be another criteria. And otherwise, anything else would work for me. We can ask Paul Slaughter. He's worked with the Yarn workspaces for years now, so he could give us some um, pointers. We stopped using. We originally used Yarn for the VS Code extension. We stopped using it because Yarn wasn't compatible with the VSIX release tool, but they might have fixed it. But it because of the I don't know how they call it, hoisting or whatever, like the deduping of dependencies in your package, like node modules directory, it just didn't work. Anyway, I have a dinner. Thank you so much for attending. I'm glad we had a very productive chat, and I'll keep talking to you all on issues and hopefully in person soon.
Cool.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye, guys.